fire, and blood? More like podcasting and cats, because your geek history lesson on the House of the Dragon is now in session. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I am Jason Snow Inman. Welcome to your Mind University, because we are traveling north of the wall, south of the wall, east of the wall, west of the wall, to find all of Westeros, because we are Geek History Lesson. We are the podcast that we break down a pop culture thing, book, character, TV show in a little bit less than an hour so that you can prove your your stature, your class superiority to all your friends as you watch.
Why did you make yourself an illegitimate son by naming yourself Snow?
Ashley, I'm going to say this. I don't know much about the world of Westeros besides from like reading the books, and I haven't researched it as you have, and you're going to take us down this amazing House of Dragons scriptures in this episode. I made myself a Snow because, one, you got to realize I used to be in the United States Army, and that's kind of that was a volunteer draft, basically. I kind of think I probably would have joined the wall. Oh,
you're conflating Snow with Crow.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, so Snow is like Jon Snow's last name because he's illegitimate. The Crows are the people on the wall.
I apologize. Okay, so I am Jason Crow Inman.
They're sound-alikes, though.
This is the first Geek History Lesson where you have corrected my... Well, we have... I think we need music for this or something like that.
I think I deserve a WGA comedy writing point for this. I thought you were going to talk about how much better Jon Snow in the book is, and that's why you did
That's
that.
true. Let's get on. Okay, we are talking.
We're already too deep.
We are talking about Game of Thrones, House of Dragons.
House of the Dragons.
That is going to be hitting HBO, now, in the past, wherever you're listening to this. You might be listening to this far in the future.
Yeah,
Hello, future people.
At the time of this recording, in the future.
It is in the future, and Ashley's going to be giving us, I don't know, how would you explain this lesson?
So if you have listened to some of our previous episodes, this is going to be kind of like our Sandman episode that Jason taught, which was so wonderful, or our His Dark Materials episode that I thought. This is more vibes about the world and what you need to know about the world and the mythology and some of the key players, instead of me telling you the events of the book that this is based on, because you should go read the book yourself. Also, if you're listening to this close to when it's being released, hop over to the Jawiin Discord, where we are doing kind of a very casual like read along and chatting about it in depth there.
Well, because we always think that great works of movies or televisions or even literature, you should enjoy them. You should not ingest them in podcast form.
Yeah.
Go read from the masters. By any chance, was this lesson suggested by any of our listeners?
It sure was.
Really? Who?
Well, we have a few people who have made suggestions, like anything from Game of Thrones or like anything from Lord of the Rings.
We'll allow it.
Exactly. So the TAs on this week's episode are Manu Mishra, Glenn Shipley, Kevin Perez at Kiefer Skittles, and Geeks with Shields podcast.
Kiefer Skittles, what a name.
Yeah.
I mean that in a good way. I'm going to throw this out there, Kiefer Skittles. That is like a badass 80s action movie hero. I'm just throwing that. I would watch The Adventures of Kiefer Skittles.
Very fun.
All right, cool. Are we ready to move into the 10-cent origin?
We surely are. What's that, Jason?
The 10-cent origin is where Ashley is going to give you the basic Cliff Notes version of House of the Dragons and explain to you the difference between a Snow and a Crow, which I obviously needed, in case you go to an amazing cocktail party somewhere with the river people and they ask you all about House Targaryen.
Yes. So, A Song of Ice and Fire is a fantasy book series, and Game of Thrones / The House of the Dragon are HBO television shows written and conceived by George R.R. Martin and adapted into 8 seasons of Game of Thrones and the upcoming debut season of House of the Dragon.
Ashley, can I ask you a real quick question? I apologize for interrupting. Is the book Game of Thrones House of the Dragons considered to be part of the Song of the Fire and Ice saga?
So the book is called Blood and Fire.
Okay.
Or Fire and Blood. I'm sorry, I get the words, which are the words of House Targaryen, and it is a history of House Targaryen, which I'm going to tell you more about later. They are considered to be in the Song of Ice and Fire canon.
Okay, I was just curious because, like when Star Wars, we have the Skywalker saga and then we have the Mando fun stuff.
Yeah. The Mando fun stuff.
Okay, so this is couched under Song of Ice and Fire.
Yes, very that.
Cool. All right, thank you.
And they are inspired by the real life historical events of the War of the Roses. We're going to get a little bit into that as well in some of the direct inspiration points in the story. I would encourage you, if you don't know about the War of the Roses, to do some research. It's a very interesting time in history, set in the fictional world of Westeros and dealing with the battle for the unification of the Seven Kingdoms and who sits astride the Iron Throne. We have previous Game of Thrones lessons taught by myself, Jason, Rachel Cushing, and Nina Friel on Jon Snow, House Greyjoy, House Lannister, House Stark. We built a Kingsguard, and on House Targaryen. House Targaryen is our episode 19. So if you want to hear Ashley in year one, having only read 2 Game of Thrones books.
And have only podcasted for less than a year.
Teach, for a couple months.
You should go listen to that because it'd be interesting to compare Ashley GHL year 8 to Ashley GHL year 1.
Very early, like first 6 months of year 1.
Oh, wow. I forgot about we did a Kingsguard episode. That was a fun episode.
Yeah. Go check that out because a lot of people have been requesting it. And I've been like, hey, we did it 8 years ago.
Look, this is a good problem to have.
Absolutely. We love it.
We have been podcasting for 8 years now.
Yep.
On this show. And I love when we get newer listeners that they're like, hey, can you do like a Nightwing episode? And I want to say we did it as episode 10.
Yeah. I think Jon Snow might have been episode 6. I know Jon Snow was the first one because I spoiled a bunch of stuff for myself on that. But there is a House Targaryen.
That's right.
We are not intentionally not doing it. And I will, the week this episode comes out, I'll share it as well.
Cool.
And please note, at the time of this recording, we have not seen any of House of the Dragon.
So there'll be
there are no spoilers other than things that we're seeing in the trailers. So there you go. Let's move on.
No spoilers.
No spoiler alert. Let's move on to the meet cute. Jason, what is that?
The meet cute is a term that we stole from romantic comedies, where Ashley and I are going to tell you how we first mitted and cuted the Game of Thrones saga.
Now, Jason and I have explained this like 7 times already. So I'd really encourage you to go back and listen to the originals. But like a lot of people with Game of Thrones, we read the book. So.
Oh, well, actually, I watched the pilot for Game of Thrones first, and I was so impressed by the opening episode that I read the books.
I did the opposite.
And I actually finished the first book before the season.
I read the first book.
So I knew what was coming.
And then I watched the first 2 seasons. So there you go. With Game of Thrones in particular, your meet cute is one of 2. You either read the book or you saw the show. That's kind of it. So now we're going to move into the History 101. Jason, what's that?
We're getting into it's the History 101. We're going to explain everything.
You usually say the main meat of the lesson and offend any vegans listening to us.
The main meat of the lesson of our Targaryen lasagna.
Yes. We are going to dive deep into the House of the Dragon and into a period called the Dance of the Dragon.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that.
It's going to be a really fun conversation. I am super looking forward to it. I
already have a discussion point, but I want to let you finish.
Oh, okie dokie. Keep it in your mind. If you like this kind of conversation, if you're really into like high fantasy or A Song of Ice and Fire, we have more on this. This week's Geek History Lesson Extra on the Patreon is about which Game of Thrones house we belong to, which I'm really excited to talk about because I have opinions about both me and Jason. We swear on that one, which people miss from the early days. If you listen to House Targaryen and you miss that level of swearing, you are going to want to come over and head over to patreon.com/Jawiin. We also have other fun shows, Jason and Jeremy John about Justice League, which I love. It's the only one I get to listen to as a fan, where they're reviewing Justice League, the animated series, 3 bonus podcast scripts, art, all of that fun stuff. And I already mentioned the Discord where we're reading Fire and Blood. So just check that out. Patreon.com/Jawiin. Thank you. We love you. You're beautiful. Okay. Are you ready for dragons?
Yes.
Should we do your discussion point first, or are you holding it for the right time?
Well, I might hold it.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
If you don't answer it soonish, I will ask it.
Okay. So here is the nice thing about the House of the Dragon.
Okay.
If you have seen or read anything about Game of Thrones, have even a passing familiarity with it, you are going to be absolutely fine going into the House of the Dragon, because all of the big houses, all of the important locations in Westeros in House of the Dragon are the same ones from Game of Thrones. They're just like 200 years earlier. Which I know was a part of the development of the show. And one of the reasons why they picked this show in particular is because it's a lot more accessible than doing something, which would have been my preference, during the Age of Heroes, which is sort of to use the Lord of the Rings term, the first age of Westeros.
If you've seen Game of Thrones, the worldwide phenomenon HBO show.
One of those popular television shows of all time.
It was the biggest show in the world for several years.
Yeah.
At least this show because it's 300 years earlier, right?
200
years earlier, would have all the same families.
Yep.
And if you've seen the trailer, you know that a good chunk of this show is going to take place in, what is the name of their capital city?
King's Landing.
King's Landing, which looks almost exactly the same as it did on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, they probably just used the same assets.
They probably used the same assets.
Also, again, just one last time, we have done a Geek History lesson on House Targaryen. It is episode 19. So please go and check that out. If any Targaryen-specific questions come up that don't get addressed, Jason, because it's been a minute since we last talked about the world of Westeros.
Been a while.
I want to ask you.
It's been a while.
How are your feelings about House Targaryen in general, and what do you think about the choice to center the next television show around them?
I don't like them. I think they're bad juju, bad people, all the Targaryens. I don't enjoy them. I understand why they picked them. Because Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, played by Emilia Clarke, was a lot of people's favorite character. And I understand the idea of romanticizing a blonde character riding dragons. I also know that a lot of big fan questions and concerns about Game of Thrones were that we didn't get enough of the dragons. So why not make a show that is all about the dragons? Dragon is in the title.
They're expensive.
But maybe they've budgeted for that in this one.
They must have, because they are incredibly important.
Maybe that's the reason why they're like, this show is going to only be set in King's Landing because we're spending a lot of money on dragons.
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere else. We're not going to shoot in Iceland.
We're only shooting in that village in Croatia.
Yes, which is where the shooting location for King's Landing.
Yep.
I understand. Look, it's funny. At the end of Game of Thrones, there's no spoilers for Game of Thrones series, but the two most popular characters were Jon Snow, played by Kit Harington, and Daenerys, played by Emilia Clarke. To me, it makes the most sense that the two Game of Thrones spinoffs that are happening right now, we have a Jon Snow spinoff, and we have Daenerys' grandparents.
I think great grandparents.
But close enough, you know what I'm saying? Like, it makes total sense to me. I am not a huge fan of the Targaryens, but I will say, without having seen even a frame of the show, I'm going to watch this show because I like enough of the Game of Thrones world that I'm curious.
Same. Okay, so I have to explain a little bit about the timeline and when this is set for this to make any sense to you. So, the Westerosi time periods are broken up by the year of Aegon's conquest. That is year 0. So there is before Aegon's conquest, and there is after Aegon's conquest.
And when you say Aegon, you mean Aegon Targaryen.
Yes. So Aegon Targaryen flew over to Westeros from Old Valyria with his 2 sisters, who were both of his wives. Gross. And they united the 7 kings. They're colonizers. They are white blood colonizers.
What is Valyria?
So Valyria, or Old Valyria, as it is called, is just another country on the global planet.
Off the coast from Westeros.
That is Westeros. Yeah, that is to the east of Westeros.
And we didn't see it in Game of Thrones, did we?
We did not. No.
Okay.
No.
Because I know we crossed the sea in that show.
We went to Essos.
Essos, okay. But we've never seen Valyria.
We've never seen Old.
Do you think we'll see Valyria in the show?
I don't know, but I would really like to.
Now, let me ask you, is this spoiling anything for your lesson? Can I ask you a question here real quick?
Go for it.
Do you think, because this is a Targaryen show in House of the Dragon, that we might go to Valyria?
I do not.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Based on when this is set.
Are you disappointed by that?
I do not. No, not really. I'm not I would like to see it. If we don't see it, I won't be devastated.
Because the only thing I know about Valyria from Game of Thrones and what they tell us is the idea that that's the place that has the most badass steel that makes the most amazing swords.
The Valyrian steel.
Yeah.
A lot of magic.
It's the swords that can kill the Night Walkers.
The White Walkers, yeah. A lot of magic comes out of there. It's also where the dragons come from.
Okay.
So Aegon and his 2 sisters that he was married to fly over to Westeros, and they're the only 3 people with dragons. So they basically colonize and beat everybody into submission. They declare themselves king and queens. And whenever they slaughtered someone, Aegon collected the swords, and that's what they built the Iron Throne out of.
Oh, and the Iron Throne is made of swords.
The swords of his fallen.
Melted by a dragon, I assume?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is year 0, if you want to think about it in like our world. That's year 0.
Okay, when does House of the Dragon take
House of the Dragon is set in 103 AC, so 103 years after Aegon's conquest.
Interesting.
So we're about 4 generations from Aegon Targaryen.
So the invasion by Aegon is recent.
Ish, yeah.
Yeah, but it's
about as recent as the First World War is to us right now, yes.
Oh, I didn't think it was that close.
It is.
Wow. So there would be enough generational memory in Westeros.
Absolutely.
That some people would be like, oh, I remember the pre-Targaryen days.
Yes.
Wow.
Or my grandfather or my great-grandfather would have been.
I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yes.
All right, interesting.
So in terms of your Game of Thrones television show timeline, House of the Dragon takes place 172 years before Daenerys is born, which means it takes place 186 years before the pilot episode of Game of Thrones. So it's not quite equidistant, but it's about 1/3 away from Aegon's conquest and 2/3 away from Game of Thrones.
It's almost like from us to the American Revolution.
Exactly. And it's basically set halfway in between Fire and Blood and A Song of Ice and Fire in terms of like a book continuity. You probably know this, listeners, from the trailer, but the show has to do with a war of succession, which is really leaning into the War of the Roses implication, because the War of the Roses was a question about who was going to succeed the Yorks or the Plantagenets, which ended up in the Tudor dynasty. Basically, like TLDR, Matt Smith's character, Prince Daemon, kicks off a war called the Dance of the Dragons, which probably would have been the title if George R. R. Martin hadn't already used that name in the Game of Thrones books.
So, okay. And I believe there's an episode of Game of Thrones called Dance of the Dragons. That was my question. My question was, why don't you think they called this show The Dance of the Dragons?
Because he'd already called the book that.
You think so?
Yeah.
It's a better title.
It is a better title, but Fire and Blood are the words. House of the Dragon. It's kind of
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you think it's kind of a marketing thing? Because I could see an executive thinking about, if we say House of the Dragon, people know it's a Targaryen show.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I definitely think it's a title and it's a choice that was made for the television viewing audience, which executives and marketing people tend to view a certain way versus the book reading audience,
Sure.
Which, again, executives and marketing tends to think of a certain way. But now, Jason, we are going to talk about the Doctor.
The Doctor?
Yeah.
Wow!
The Doctor, in this case, Matt Smith, who is playing Prince Daemon. So you might have, known from listening to this podcast or from our reactions, know that we are both big Doctor Who fans. We are both big Matt Smith fans. So Jason, when he was cast in the show, were you excited?
Look, I've liked him in everything that I've seen him in. I haven't seen Morbius. I haven't more time yet. I don't know if I will. But anyways, I've liked him. I only watched The Crown because I saw he was cast in it.
Yeah.
And then I was blown away with how good that show is. So, yes, I was excited. He is also an actor that I'm always just surprised he's not in more things.
I agree.
I
agree. Okay.
So I'm glad he's in this show.
Me too. He's the number one reason I'm watching this show.
Him and the gentleman that's playing his dad or the king are also great.
So I'm going to break down the characters, including the cast.
Great.
Just for everybody's ease. So Paddy Considine is playing King Viserys, who is the patriarch of the Targaryen family. He is the elder king who we've seen in the trailers, who for our Targaryen enthusiasts is the grandson of King Jaehaerys. So there you go. That's just for the book readers. Jason. Is the name Viserys ruined forever because of Daenerys' awful older brother in Game of Thrones?
No, not really.
Because when I hear that name, I'm like, and kudos to the actor who does a wonderful job.
So this is who Daenerys' brother is named for?
Yes, exactly. Well, so this Viserys is actually named after Queen Visenya, who was one of Aegon's sisters who came over and
close
conquered.
enough.
But yes, he's the first Viserys, I believe.
No, not really, because to be honest with you, I think because her brother dies in book 1 and in season 1. I think
a satisfying death.
Most people forget that character existed.
Yeah.
But I think most people remember it more for the dragon because she names her dragon.
Viserion, yes. Yeah.
No, not really. And I will say that Paddy is an amazing actor. He's in Hot Fuzz, I believe.
Yeah, he's gonna bring. Is he also in a Bourne movie?
Yes, he is. He was
that we watched recently.
He was in the Bourne Ultimatum. Yeah. He's
gonna be a good time.
He is an interesting choice for this role because he is not a classical kingly character
Yes, which...
or actor.
Here's the thing. If you're a Targaryen and you are a male and your name is Viserys, you high-key suck.
Basically.
Like, that is the rule. If you're a woman and your name is like Visenya, you're a lot more powerful, but you're also kind of cold. So there tend to be trends with the name. So King Viserys has stirred up a lot of drama even before he became the king because he was named king over his elder cousin. So succession is supposed to be to the oldest, but his older cousin is what? A woman. So Eve Best, she plays his elder cousin named Rhaenys. She is the tall, statuesque blonde who we see, who is actually the direct heir to the Iron Throne based on age, but discounted because of misogyny. She also has a very powerful husband named Corlys Velaryon, who is played by Steve Toussaint, who is a great actor, who is the richest man in Westeros. Now, Corlys Velaryon. Doesn't Velaryon sound like Valeria? So the Targaryens weren't the only great family who ever came over from old Valyria. The Velaryons, who are their cousins, also came over around the same time during Aegon's conquest.
Got it.
And they are also, you know how the Targaryens always call themselves Blood of the Dragon because they're dragon riders?
Yeah.
The House Velaryon is also Blood of the Dragon, and they can ride dragons.
So if you're basically from old Valyria, you got a connection to a dragon.
Yeah, or at least if you're from old Valyria and your family's rich and affluent.
Okay, got it.
Not as familiar with the peasant class of old Valyria, if I'm being very honest. Okay, so here's a fun fact. I thought before I read Fire and Blood that Matt Smith's character, previously named Prince Daemon, was King Viserys' son. He's not.
Who is he?
He is his younger brother.
Oh,
but the next male heir. He has a dragon named Caraxes.
Ooh, that's a cool name.
Yeah, it is a cool name.
Caraxes. Sounds like Kraken.
Caraxes.
Sounds like a Doctor Who planet.
So he is the younger brother of the king.
Okay.
King Viserys does have children, but he has a daughter.
So let me ask you this. So I might have forgotten this from Game of Thrones series. Good. In Game of Thrones, is it considered that women cannot be the king? That's
why it's a big deal. Like, the only reason Daenerys has any power is because she's the last Targaryen.
Oh, that's right. Because that's why Joffrey is in charge when he's like 13.
And if you'll remember in Game of Thrones, there is maybe another Targaryen out there for a little while who's a male who like threatens Daenerys' claim to the throne.
That happens in the books, but the TV show completely ignored that.
I think for the sake of the television show, I think it was smart.
I agree.
So King Viserys does have a daughter. The actress's name is Emma Darcy. She plays Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen. If you're a book reader, you kind of know Rhaenyra is a very specific name that's referenced a lot by Daenerys. Let's say for her unfortunate end. So she's the daughter of King Viserys, but being a woman, she is obviously out of the running for succession when he has a younger male brother.
Got it.
She has a dragon named Syrax. So Syrax and Caraxes.
Ooh, I like all these X names.
If you read the long form articles that they've been releasing about the production of House of the Dragon.
Yes, I have on Hollywood Reporter. They're really fascinating.
And you were doubting why Matt Smith couldn't get the names right. I think this really illustrates they're a lot of the same vowel sounds, right?
Yeah, you should go read them. There's a fascinating series of articles. I was telling Ashley about them that they went behind the scenes of the production, and they start off with a story that apparently Matt Smith has a hard time remembering when he was shooting this, had a hard time remembering the name of his dragon.
Yeah, Caraxes.
Yeah, and he said apparently at one point where he was like, "What's the name of my effing dragon?"
It's so funny to me. That's going to be high memeable content in the future. I'm glad that they told us that story. So the main drama of House of the Dragon is ignited by Princess Rhaenyra, daughter of King Viserys, by her good friend Alicent Hightower.
Hightower is a name that I remember.
Yes, they're a pretty important family. Alicent Hightower, played by actress Olivia Cooke. If any Bates Motel folks are out there, you will know Olivia Cooke. I was a big Bates Motel fan, so I'm excited to see what she's going to do here. Alicent Hightower is Princess Rhaenyra's closest friend until her father makes her his wife. So, I mean...
Which that is spoiled in the trailers.
It is spoiled in the trailers, yeah. There is there is like high creep factor in a lot of the sexual relationships in Game of Thrones, and this is very much canon to that but also canon to like what royal families did during this time period.
Can we drop into this conversation as much as you are comfortable with?
Yes.
Ashley?
Jason.
As a smart, capable woman.
Go on.
Female podcaster here.
Yes.
How do you feel about House of the Dragon telling this story, especially when we are in an era where we are trying to not tell those stories?
Interesting. I will say post Game of Thrones trying to convince me that I was supposed to root for an incestual relationship. I would rather see this.
Okay.
It's interesting because if you take this as this is a medieval society, because it's not even Renaissance, it's very much medieval. I totally get why if you're Alicent Hightower, like I understand why you're like, well, the king wants to marry me. I don't care that he's old enough to be my dad. Like, what better option is going to come along? I think if the showrunners, who I'm going to name and talk about in a little bit,
okay,
I think if they're smart enough, there is a lot of really interesting ways that you can present this as a contemporary feminist skewing narrative. And that's what now it is 3 dudes, but this is what I hope we do with this.
From the Hollywood Reporter articles
Yep.
that I have read, from those very same ones, they have stated that the theme of this show is misogyny.
Yeah, and Olivia Cook in, I talked about Bates Motel before. She plays a character who has a breathing disorder. So she's kind of like one of Norman's like love interests in the show, and you think that she is weak and incapable, and this character Emma winds up being really important, and she has a really important role to play in the show. So I've seen her take a character who you think is going to be kind of like a soggy mess and make her really powerful and really interesting. So I have faith in the fact that like I enjoyed the Game of Thrones show. I've enjoyed her performance before. So I think if everyone wants it to work, I think you could do it in an interesting way. But like, are there going to be gross moments? Yeah.
Yes.
There are.
And I just wanted to bring that up because like I think nowadays there's this interesting thing where, look, I think that there are always going to be stories about subjects that are problematic, gross, as you said,
Yep.
bothersome.
Yep.
But if the lesson or the moral of the
Yep.
story is a positive one and not glorifying said incident,
Yep.
then I think it's fine. But there has come this discussion point around where people automatically will just throw that away because of the subject matter. And even though, and I hope this is what the series is going to do.
Yeah.
I hope that the series that like this woman is going to live through this terrible incident, but be better on the other side of it.
Yes. So there's 2 things. There's a lot of drama, of course, around like, this is his daughter's best friend. What does that mean? Can you imagine what the conception of future children might mean?
Well, actually, are we going to talk about, do you know about...
Okay, hold on that.
Okay,
I know what you're
know
going
what
to
I'm
ask.
talking about? Yeah, okay.
But there's also this
Yeah, but the listeners don't.
We'll get to it, I promise.
Okay.
It's like my next discussion point.
All right, interesting. This is an inside podcast joke here.
Spoiler alert, we maybe talk about stuff before we record. The other thing to consider is if you consider the House Targaryen tradition is how you say incest. It is to
Aren't all royal families. That's the royal tradition.
Yes, but so
I would like a dish of incest that will serve with a side of incest, please.
We're gonna really rip that hairline right back. We're gonna make that Habsburg chin. We love that Habsburg chin.
Could I perhaps have a dollop more of first cousin?
Oh no! But with Targaryens specifically, they like to wed siblings.
Oh yeah.
So if I can put my book nerd hat on for a second.
Please do.
In Fire and Blood.
Stop, Ashley. Actually put it on. Listeners, she didn't do it. She did. Okay, that actually just on her head. Okay, cool. Listeners, I was gonna hold her to. She didn't do anything. I made her put. She's got her book nerd hat on right now.
One of us is good at space work, and one of us is me.
It's quite fascinating. It's a red and white trucker hat.
Oh, how dare! How dare!
And it's got big yellow letters. With
I almost swore at you.
With a heavy bold shadow, and it just says
in papyrus font.
And it says keep on reading.
Keep on reading.
And there's no G on the reading.
So in Fire and Blood, They do talk about that as the Targaryen tradition. That's a tradition brought over from old Valyria.
They love marrying their brothers and sisters.
They love it.
Yeah.
What
a Christmas.
And at worst, you're supposed to marry your cousin. So if you consider that the elder Princess Rhaenys, who King Viserys stepped over to become the king, she's married to a Valerion who are first cousins of the Targaryens. So there's a big deal in Fire and Blood, specifically because of the faith of the Seven. The Septons and the Septas are against incest.
Can you give just a really quick explanation of what the faith of the Seven is?
The faith of the Seven is kind of like the Christianity of Game of Thrones.
Do you know what the Seven are? I don't remember.
The Smith.
Oh, I didn't mean. Okay, so these are just
they're 7 deities,
got it,
and they're archetypes that the crone is one of them. Yeah. They represent the warrior. I could probably get the 7.
We don't need to go down the rabbit hole of a fake religion.
But they are kind of the most popular, most contemporary religion in Game of Thrones.
Got it. Thank you.
They're kind of okay with marrying your cousins. They are not okay with you marrying your siblings. But
okay, so they're on their side of the right there.
When Aegon and his 2 sister wives showed up with their dragons, they were like, this is fine. Everything's fine. We love this. Everything's fine.
Whatever you want to do, don't burn us.
When their grandchildren and children tried to marry their brothers and sisters, people died. So
from
uprisings of the faith, knights, people, they're very anti-incest. So, but if you look at this marriage between the father and the daughter's friend, and you consider the fact that Targaryens are known to interbreed, it's a big deal that he's marrying somebody who is Westerosi. Like a High Tower they are not related to Old Valyria in any way, shape, or form. Like this is bucking his family's tradition as much as it is maybe the societal tradition of not sleeping with your daughter's best friend.
It's interesting.
So there's drama sort of on 2 fronts, in my opinion.
And is there some subtext in here, and you don't have to go too specific, it might be spoilers for the show. Is there some subtext in here of this is him trying to grab some more power from Westeros to extend the reach of the Targaryens?
It is, because this is sort of considered the downturn. This is the beginning of the end of the Targaryen dynasty. The events of the Dance of the Dragons directly lead to Daenerys being the last Targaryen.
Interesting.
And if it's kind of your opinion and your favorite character. Who are you going to lay blame with?
Yeah, fair.
So I've given you all the main players. Would you like to know if King Viserys and Alicent have any children? Because I do know the answer to that.
Oh, do you think if I get the answer to this question, anything will be spoiled?
I think it's a mild spoiler. If you want to know, I'll tell you. If not, I will tell people that they can go Google it themselves because it's very Googleable.
No, tell me if they have children.
They do have a child.
Okay, a child.
A child.
Okay, is it a girl?
It is a son. Named Aegon. After the Conqueror, because if you have a son, right, you further the war
you honor
of
the
succession.
The grandfather or whatever, yeah.
So Jason hasn't read Fire and Blood. Jason doesn't know. I would like to know, Jason, here are the potential heirs to King Viserys. I want to know who you think.
Who's actually going to get the throne?
Who is going to get the throne? I will neither confirm nor deny. I will let this lie because it's going to be a big part of the show. If people want it, again, they can Google it.
It's going to be probably the finale of this show.
Exactly. So
7 seasons. No, I will tell the listeners this.
Yes.
One person in this podcast predicted Bran as the king from Game of Thrones,
and it was Jason,
and that was me.
So potential heirs, because spoiler alert, they all die because this happens before Game of Thrones.
Well, everybody dies. It's not spoilers there, but
so
sure.
I don't know when in the show, but at some point Viserys will die, and they will have to figure out who is the heir. So here are all the potential heirs.
Okay.
His older cousin, who he stepped over to get it, Princess Rhaenys.
Okay.
His younger brother, Prince Daemon. Or his youngest son.
Daemon is Matt Smith.
Daemon is Matt Smith. His eldest daughter, Princess Rhaenyra. Or his youngest son, Prince Aegon. Who do you think takes the Iron Throne?
I want it to be Aegon. My gut tells me it's going to be the cousin.
His older cousin.
Princess
Rhaenys.
The one that he stepped over.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. So you think it's going to be a lady? You think it's going to be a Daenerys type situation?
I do.
Interesting. Well, I will neither confirm nor deny, but
So listeners,
Very interesting.
you can laugh at me, and I can't hear it all you want.
Yeah. Again, fully Googleable.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I'll have you answered for me off the podcast.
Sure. So what I think is going to be interesting about House of the Dragon in comparison to Game of Thrones is that the Song of Ice and Fire books are written from either an omnipotent narrator, third person perspective, or there are these point of view chapters,
yes,
right? We engage directly in the narrative as a godhead, looking at what is Theon doing now? What is Jon doing now? Things like that. Fire and Blood, the inspiration for House of the Dragon, is written as a history. And George R.R. Martin is writing it as the Westerosi historian, Archmaester Gildane.
Sure.
So it is a person offering an opinion on events. This makes Fire and Blood inherently biased as it is being presented from an in-world character with his own motives and means and personality. There are opinions proffered throughout on characters' actions. There are forgivenesses thrown at characters like Alysanne Targaryen, who commits incest in marrying her brother, but she's really sweet, so they call her Good Queen Alysanne. So he's like, it's fine that she like stooped her brother for a while because we all liked her.
I can't believe you said stooped.
I almost said the F word, so that was what I came up with.
Stooped is an actual Westerosi word, everybody.
It is. It's a Hightower word, as we all
Apparently so.
as we all know. That's how I don't swear on those podcasts. I personally, again, having not seen House of the Dragon, I am not sure if this is going to affect the way House of the Dragon is presented as a television show. They might have a narrator, when Game of Thrones didn't have a narrator.
That will give that show a completely different feel, which I don't mind.
But I find it a really compelling distinction between the two stories, that like one is an omnipotent narrator, one is
you're living with the characters.
For all intents and purposes, like an editorial, like a character piece more than anything. So I mentioned an unreliable narrator. Jason, you are our resident writer. Why don't you let us know? Why don't you explain to us what an unreliable narrator is?
So you said that House of the Dragon, what's the name of the book again? Excuse me?
Fire and Blood.
Fire and Blood is portrayed and told by an unreliable narrator. Yes. An unreliable narrator is a narrator who you don't know is telling you the truth.
Yeah.
Probably, it's not the most famous example, but this is the easiest example I have ever heard. This is how I learned unreliable narrator. If you've ever seen the television show How I Met Your Mother, the entirety of How I Met Your Mother is told by an unreliable narrator. It's told by Future Ted. Yeah. And the reason why you know it's unreliable is because there are several points, even in the pilot, where he misremembers things. And you suddenly see entire scenes change because he's remembered, oh no, this is how it actually happened. And it introduces this whole idea of like, well, can I trust anything you're telling me? It might all be a lie. So Ashley, Fire and Blood.
Yep.
It's complete. There's not going to be a sequel or anything like that?
I mean, as far as we know, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 1 volume, one and done.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
From Fire and Blood, do you think there is a chance that if House of the Dragon is told with an unreliable narrator, is there a chance for a twist or a revelation with that fact? Like, could the unreliable narrator, could they make us think it's X character and then, oh no, it's this person?
Oh, yes, 100%, particularly with the succession.
Because, and the reason why I introduced that is because that is a modus operandi that George R.R. Martin has done before. If you remember from the books, the revelation of who is Reek.
Here's my other thing. Even though the book is written by this Grand Maester who is named,
the show could change that.
Right.
Yeah,
if it was me, if I were one of the showrunners, I would pay Emilia Clarke whatever she wanted to come back and reveal that this was either a project that Daenerys was, or that she had funded someone to, like, obviously, I guess spoiler alerts for Game of Thrones, she dies. Yeah. That maybe you see a scene where she goes to somebody and is like, write my family's official history.
Oh, I would be down.
Like in the finale episode, I think fan service could be kind of fun if we did something like that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. Or even get the gentleman who played her brother, Viserys.
Yeah.
It would be better if it was her. But that's interesting.
So
I'm down for that.
So yes. And
here's another crazy bonkers pitch on top of that. Because we know there's a Jon Snow show out there. And spoilers for the end of Game of Thrones. we know that Jon Snow
he's a
is Targaryen. What if the end scene of House of the Dragon leads us directly into the Jon Snow show?
That's interesting. Sure,
because that show's being developed. That show's being developed. Or the
same thing, like you could cut away at the end, right, and have it be like
some book at the wall.
Or you could have it be John and Sam writing the book or something like that. Yeah, I think that could be cool. I just think it's there's a good chance it doesn't have anything to do with the show.
You're right.
But it really sets Fire and Blood apart from the thus far published
everybody listening to this podcast, that has seen the show already is always like, oh, you idiots.
Yeah, well,
whatever.
That's what happens.
That's what happens when you schedule podcasts, baby.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get stooped.
Oh my God, I regret saying that so bad. I've mentioned this before, but in many ways, the Dance of the Dragons, which is this War of Succession, is the beginning of the end of the 300-year Targaryen dynasty.
Now, why don't you explain that for anybody in case they don't know what that is?
Targaryen dynasty?
No, like the fall, like what exactly happens?
Oh, so
if you've watched Game of Thrones, you know, but just in case.
So Aegon came over with his sister wives on that TLC show, and they started the Seven Kingdoms, the Iron Throne, as we think of them in the world of Game of Thrones. Then this tall, hot, sexy Baratheon, Robert, and his broody best friend, Nedward, they launched a thing called Robert's Rebellion, and they murdered the Mad King, Aerys Targaryen. Aerys the Second, I believe. They murdered him, and Robert declared himself king.
Yeah,
that's the end,
and that's the start of Game of Thrones.
That's the start of that's sort of the precursor
but
to
it's
like
close enough.
20 years or so before Game of Thrones. Yeah, definitely. So that all happens within 300 years, but you can this Westerosi historian who writes Fire and Blood points to the events of the Dance of the Dragons / the House of the Dragons television show as being what kicks off their fall from grace and their fall from power.
Which is so interesting because, from what you told me, they'd only been in power for like 80 years at this point.
103.
103? So it really wasn't like an amazing...
Like 3
It wasn't like, for thousands of years.
Yeah, it's because the Targaryens aren't good at anything.
No. Yeah.
So
they are just colonizers that should have just stayed where they were.
Yeah. I think it is interesting that despite only being 100 years or so into conquering the Seven Kingdoms, it's like evident that things aren't going super well for like they are on the struggle dragons. You know what I mean? Something that I mentioned in the Jawiin Discord in our little book club that I found really compelling about Fire and Blood is that in like the opening paragraph, George R.R. Martin / the Archmaester specifically state that House Targaryen is not a great house of Old Valyria.
Whoa, the narrator, like out the beginning, is like, well, these guys aren't great. They're not good.
Well, he said in Old Valyria they were not considered a great house until they conquered Westeros. And it's because there were a ton of other dragon lords who maybe had their houses in order.
But in Westeros, they were the only ones with dragons.
And direwolves are great, or krakens are great, or stags are great. If you know what houses those are associated for, I love you. But it's hard to beat a dragon. It's a long range weapon. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's very similar to the first colonizers showing up to Africa with rifles.
That's exactly what it is.
And North America.
Yes. Yeah. I also find it like the colonizer metaphor is definitely intentional. Martin is way too smart for it not to be. But I also find it like super funny because they are the blondest blondes who ever blonded, presented as these like colonizers. So it's only after they go all colonizer on the Endals and the first men of Westeros that the Targaryen name is synonymous with power. And again, only because they had dragons and purple eyes. Back in Old Valyria, the Valerians and a bunch of other houses also had dragons, and they held greater sway and influence than they ever did, back in Valyria. So because so much of the drama in Game of Thrones swirls around Daenerys Targaryen and what she believes she is owed, despite in no way illustrating that she's capable of anything, this resonates with
Can't wait for your tweets on that comment.
Fine. I will die on this hill. She was never going to be queen, and you are wrong to be upset about it.
I agree.
This like resonates with my view of House Targaryen personally, because I find them slightly irritating. So I was like, yeah, tell me they suck. Well, as I'm going to read 700 pages about them specifically.
It's one of the things is, yes, you and I are, we're not enthused by a Targaryen show. But again, like I said at the very beginning, I'm willing to go into this with an open mind.
Me too.
It would be the same thing like if
we would be hypocritical to just write it off.
It would be the same thing as if they did a Harry Potter show, but they were like, it's going to be based on the Slytherin house. And you'd be like, do I really want to watch the show about the evil house?
About the Nazis?
Yes.
Yeah.
But if
0 out of 10 will not watch a Harry Potter show.
But if it's me neither, but it was the best example.
Yeah. I understand. So if listeners want to be spoiled, like I said,
we spoiled a lot about Game of Thrones in this podcast.
You can figure out what happens, and you can kind of extrapolate from who strides the Iron Throne, what's going to happen from here. And you can really understand post Dance of the Dragons how we wind up with Viserys and Daenerys being the only two, these sort of peasant kings and queens wandering around kind of looking for a handout.
Mm-hmm.
So the House of the Dragons shares 2 showrunners, Miguel Sapochnik and Ryan Condal, with George R.R. Martin also in the mix. He's some kind of EP.
He would be an EP.
Executive producer.
Yeah.
I couldn't find his exact title.
I guarantee you he's EP.
Yeah.
So basically, if you don't know, listeners, the showrunners would be the guys that would be in the writer's room. They would also be in charge of all forms of production from on the set to post-production. And George is an EP and all the other EPs. I guarantee there's a couple of HBO.
Oh, for sure.
They basically are not into every day-to-day, but they get to say yay or nay.
They're tastemakers.
Yes. You have to run everything by the EP. So like at least on this show, George R. R. Martin, whether he reads it or not, has to say yay or nay to every script, every edit, every special effects shot, all that stuff.
I also know Miguel Sapochnik also worked on a lot of Game of Thrones, so he's coming like directly out of that tradition.
Cool.
But Ryan Condal, one of the showrunners, has compared House of the Dragon to the show Succession for any of our HBO viewers here.
Interesting.
In a lot of the interviews that have come up leading to the show, in that it focuses more on the interfamily drama between the Targaryens than necessarily like the plays for the Iron Throne that we're familiar with from like House Lannister and House Baratheon, which are still going on at this time, by the way. The Lannisters have always tried to be kings and queens.
So can we bring up the thing? I meant to bring it up earlier.
Yes.
That you thought I was going to bring up.
Okay.
But I don't think you thought the same thing I thought.
Okay.
So the thing I want to talk about, this is minor spoilers for I almost called it House of the Thrones. House of the Dragons.
House of the Throne. I mean, it might as well be.
There are time jumps in this series.
Yes, there are. And there are actors playing older and younger versions of these characters.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
I've heard they also said that this show is they're comparing it to The Crown. Mm-hmm. And they said that in between episodes, even in the first season, they're going to jump ahead.
So, Jason, this is great because this is the final thing I want to ask you.
Sure.
As we're sort of like wrapping up this episode. As a TV writer, how do you feel about this spinoff focusing on the micro instead of the macro?
I think it's better.
Because Game of Thrones is all about the entire chessboard, and now we're looking at specific pieces.
Well, one of the weaknesses of Game of Thrones towards the end was that the show got so big and involved like all the different corners of Westeros.
Yes, we had a lot of ground literally to cover.
And I never minded it, but it did come out, and I saw a lot of fans complain about it. And I understand the complaint, even though I thought it was BS, was the fact that we had certain characters travel great distances.
Oh, yeah. Jon Snow was a speedster.
Yeah, in between edits. Now, again, you have to assume that between those cuts, 5 weeks passed. But most viewers won't do that, because, especially since like we spend season 1 of Game of Thrones. It takes us 5 episodes to get to King's Landing from Winterfell.
Oh my God, if not more. Yeah, a huge amount of time.
In the last season, somebody goes from above the wall to King's Landing in the same episode.
No, it's Jon. Yeah.
And you're like, what? So, and again, I still enjoyed it.
Yes.
But I think that's the right decision. Now, the real answer is going to be, is the family dynamics and is this story strong enough to support that? And I don't know.
Yeah, having read Fire and Blood, I'm about halfway through the book
You tell me, what do you think?
I think it's a smart choice from looking at the production of the show and how to make it the same but different. Because that's what you want, right? You want the same vibes, but you want to like justify why we did another show.
It's definitely going to make the show cheaper too.
It's what we liked about The Flash and Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow spinning out of Arrow. It was a very similar formula. It was the same rules of the world, good guys, bad guys, comic book logic, but it was different enough. And that's what I think that is smart. Having not seen the show, I think on paper, it's a really, really I think it's an intelligent choice. I will say, though, like Rings of Power, I would have picked a different
time period.
A different time period and a different set of characters to focus on.
And we've had that discussion before.
Look, I'm going to watch it. I hope I understand by watching it why they picked the Dance of the Dragon specifically. But I think there are more interesting characters.
I'm excited to see it.
Than these characters.
So...
Jason, that is all that I have for our House of the Dragon. Is there anything else that you would like to ask me before we roll into our recommended reading?
Oh boy, that's a big answer.
I know, but I also know, like, with these prep questions, it's like, did I leave anything out?
I feel like if I don't ask you the correct question right now, you're going to throw me out the moon door.
We're in the airy.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think that was really good. I mean, let me ask you this question, because this is similar. You brought up the Lord of the Rings of Power,
yes,
and everyone that listens to this podcast should know that you're a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
And these shows are obviously in direct competition with each other.
And also, I believe our Rings of Power episode is next week.
Next week, yeah.
So buckle up. But do you think House of the Dragon is going to fall into the fandom trap of name checking all the stuff that we know from Game of Thrones?
Yes.
You think so?
Well, yes, because there's a trailer.
Because that's going to annoy me really bad.
There's a trailer that says Stark, Baratheon, Lannister, Targaryen. Yes, I absolutely think.
I'm fine with meeting the families because they're around. They're all around.
Yeah, but like during this time period, for example, like the Starks are just like chilling in Winterfell being Starks. But there are Stark characters in the cast.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I do think there is a laundry list we will be revisiting. That being said, Star Trek Lower Decks does that, but it does that in a way, like sometimes literally with a laundry list.
Name checking all these episodes are coming up in the next few weeks, Ashley.
Look, we like what we like.
Hey, it's all right. That's right.
Lower
Decks coming, everybody.
Does it in a way that is true to the tone of the show. So that's my hope, is that if we are going to be treading into fan service, that it is done well. Because we know fan service can be done well.
Fan service can be done well.
Yeah.
I recently talked about this on Twitter. I think the difference between good fan service and bad fan service is that you're showing us beats and things that we know, but you are twisting them in a way we've never seen. If you just repeat, like if we see a scene where a Stark family picks up a bunch of pups,
great.
No, I'm gonna say to hell with the show.
Oh, because that's literally the opening.
It's literally the opening Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Or if we see the Lannister or we see the Targaryen family executing a man on a hillside, exactly like Game of Thrones, I'm gonna be like, get out of here. But if we see maybe the young Targaryens coming across a bunch of eggs and raising a bunch of baby dragons, that's similar to Game of Thrones. That's fan service to me, but it's fan service done well.
Or if when the Stark, if a character enters the room and there's a direwolf walking beside them, I'm like, great, I know that's a Stark.
Yep.
Now prove to me why this character is valuable.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. But I will say, I refuse to engage in the revisionist history that Game of Thrones is bad.
I agree.
So I trust in everyone who's created Game of Thrones up to this point, because like I don't think it's perfect, and I've had my issues with the show and the books, but like for me overall, this world is a big win.
I agree.
So I am trusting that they have gotten creators of equal talent to make this show.
Again, I said this when Game of Thrones came out. It's exactly like Lost. I don't hate the ending of Lost. I don't hate the ending of Game of Thrones.
Nope.
And I think it's only because fans didn't get what they wanted. And by that point, the shows were both so big that it didn't matter what they gave the audience. The audience was going to hate it.
Yeah, but also
because they had already decided their own ending.
Since I have my book reader hat on, if you read the books, it's actually incredibly obvious.
It's pretty obvious what's going to happen.
From their opening POV chapters, it is incredibly obvious.
It's pretty obvious what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially since it's called The Song of Fire and Ice. It's pretty obvious what's going to happen.
So anyway,
let's just move on with that.
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, what a great lesson. Thank you so much. Let's move into the recommended reading, everybody. That is where Ashley is going to give you some suggestions of what you can read if you want to further your knowledge into the world of the House of the Dragon. It's going to be pretty obvious. There aren't that many books. And you can find all that list at geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading. We have a list for every single episode we've ever done. Little widgets. You click on it. It takes you to Amazon, and you can purchase these amazing reading materials. Ashley, what's going to join the recommended reading list this week?
Yeah, I love it when we do book stuff because it's always really straightforward.
Just read the book?
First of all, I mean, read Fire and Blood. I was on the fence about it. Like I mentioned, I'm not a huge Targaryen fan. It's a really good book. If you are into...
When did it come out?
2018.
Wow, so he put it out during Game of Thrones.
Yes, because a bunch of people were like, where is myself included, where is Winds of Winter?
Yeah, where's Winds of Winter?
And where is the Song of Spring? Give me Theon. It's fine.
Yep.
Fire and Blood, pick it up. It is really good. It's really interesting, and it is a different exploration of this world than you're used to. Also, pick up the rest of the Song of Ice and Fire books. They're awesome. There's a reason they inspired this TV show. And then I'm going to whack on there the complete Blu-ray of Game of Thrones if you haven't checked that out yet. So that's it. Now we move on to the honor roll.
Yes, the honor roll is where if you go over to Apple Podcasts and you leave us a 5-star review in Geek History Lesson, we'll read whatever you write on the air. Who is joining the honor roll this week?
First, joining the honor roll is NHunt9, who says, best podcast this side of the River Styx.
Oh, cool.
Who does that make us? I've listened to this podcast off and on for the past few years and always enjoyed it, and I recently graduated to full-time weekly listener. Welcome!
Hey!
This podcast has been a godsend because a few months ago, I started writing about comics professionally for Screen Rant. Congratulations!
Well, that's rad.
And one of the first things I did was queue up episodes on my favorite characters. Not only is it fun and efficient way of learning fascinating, complicated backstories of fan favorite characters, but the discussions you guys have inspire so many new topics for me to explore in my writing. Thank you guys so much and keep up the amazing work. Nick Hunter, Akron, Ohio.
Hello, Ohio.
Hello, Ohio. They are also joined today by Darth Hollows, who says, you will find something you love here. Can't.
that is like the most matter of fact. You're gonna find something you love. I don't know what it's gonna be, but there's gonna be at least one thing.
Can't remember exactly how I stumbled on this gem, but it's easily my favorite place to learn about comic book characters. Gets me through hours of work way happier than I would be otherwise. It's fun, lighthearted, easy format to follow. My only complaint is that I can't see the action figure spotlight beam directly into my mind. Don't ever stop the podcast. Can't wait for Max Mercury and Tex Willerman episodes.
Well, welcome. Sadly, there aren't any good Game of Thrones action figures.
There aren't. There's some cool Game of Thrones
McFarlane made some, but they aren't really good. So thank you both for that amazing 5-star reviews. Welcome into the Teacher's Lounge. Walk inside. Careful in the corner. There is a White Walker. Ooh. He walked into the school one day. We didn't know how to tell him to leave. So the janitor, we just bought a giant freezer. And
like the one they threw Jon Snow in.
No. It's like a power, like a GE. It's a giant, like it's a horizontal freezer. It's a meat freezer, right? And don't make noises. Don't get mad. He's just staring into it. Okay, he has it open and he's staring into it. But if we don't do that, he's gonna kill all of us.
That's really funny.
So we just let him be. Just call him Professor White. It's all right.
Professor White.
Yeah, we think he teaches chemistry. Okay.
Okay, that's a multi-layered joke.
So welcome. Thank you so much for those views. If you want to join those two awesome people, what great reviews. Those are both awesome. Those were great.
Yeah.
Go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. If you live internationally, you have to email us that 5-star review. You have to screenshot it and email it to us at geekhistorylesson@gmail.com.
And please tell us where you're from.
Tell us where you're from. We want to see it. Ashley,
also, if you're going to Screen Rant, check out Nick Hunter, who reviewed us. Check out, I'm assuming his, if not their, work there.
There you go. Don't forget to subscribe and listen to this podcast everywhere you find podcasts. That we're now on iHeartRadio.
Heck yeah.
We are on Amazon. We are on Spotify. Go check those out. Give us a like. And if you liked this episode, please tell your friends. It's the best way for this podcast to grow. Ashley, where can they find Geek History Lesson on social media?
You can find us on geekhistorylesson.com/blog. We got new blogs. You can also find us on facebook.com/geekhistorylesson. On our brand new Instagram at Geek History Lesson, and on Twitter at GHL Podcast because they don't have enough letters.
You can find Ashley on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V. Robinson. You can find myself on Instagram and Twitter at Jawiin. That's Jawiin. And now we are to hashtag stick around. Did I introduce a hashtag stick around sound? I'm pretty certain I did last time.
Boy, don't I remember.
I don't remember. I'm pretty certain I had a hash. Oh, you know what? I put out the call to listeners and nobody has responded. So I'm putting this out right now. Should I give them a gift of some type?
Sure.
I don't know what to do. We got to figure this out. I will give you a prize. I want a sound effect made by a listener that is hashtag stick around for the end of the podcast. And I will play your sound effect every single time because I don't want to just play this. It's not any good. Doesn't work, does it? Or this. Doesn't work. I need one specifically for hashtag stick around. So email us a great sound effect. Needs to be short. 30 seconds or less, please, for hashtag stick around. And I will send you an amazing prize. I'm going to figure that out before Rings of Power. I will announce what it is. But I want a hashtag stick around sound effect made by one of our Geek History Lesson listeners. So Ashley, what is our hashtag? Hold on. See, this is what it would be like. Ashley, it's time for hashtag stick around.
Great. Oh my God. Tex Willerman's here.
See, it's not good. Doesn't work. It's when we need one. What are we talking about?
Okay, Jason, imagine, if you will,
Okay.
you're a Targaryen.
Uh-huh.
Or like anyone from Old Valyria, I guess.
Okay.
What color's your dragon?
What are my choices?
I think all of them. There are white dragons. There are black dragons.
I didn't think there were that many colors
There's a bunch.
for dragons.
There's at least white, black, green, gold, red, and blue, at least. You can have whatever color you want.
What color is your dragon?
I asked you first.
I want a blue dragon.
Here you go. I want a purple dragon.
I want a blue dragon because I want to blend into the sky.
Oh, so you want like a light blue dragon.
Oh, yes. You won't. It's like I have a cloaking device on.
Yeah.
And you won't. You just hear the and then my guy will eat your guy.
The most famous dragon is Balerion the Black. He's the one who Aegon rode over to conquer Westeros with. He's the skull that's under King's Landing.
Oh, it's pretty big.
Yep.
He's the colonizer dragon.
He is the colonizer dragon.
All right.
If you went to the House of the Dragon experience at San Diego Comic-Con, that's the big skull that they had.
Oh, did they have it? How big was it?
Like 8 feet tall. It was big.
All right, cool.
Big.
So you could sleep inside his mouth.
I mean, I definitely could.
Okay, cool.
Could you? Maybe.
So he's not that
You're
big.
quite tall.
He's not that big then.
I don't know how wide the jawbone is, which I think is where you might run into trouble. Should have touched the prop I was not allowed to touch.
You should have pulled out your tape measure.
Yeah, the tape measure I have on me at all times.
You know, Ashley, you've heard me say multiple times that the number one thing that you need at any Comic-Con is a tape measure.
To be like, get away for 6 feet.
6 feet! Back up!
Would have been useful at San Diego.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for flapping your wings and coming on over to this podcast. I am Jason Crow Inman.
There you go. I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And please, Queen Robinson, will you please dismiss this wonderful Targaryen podcast?
Class is now dismissed.